There's all this talk from these Afro-American Negro leaders about boycotting Christmas, boycotting Black Friday, boycotting Cyber Monday, and at the end of the day, none of this stuff is going to have any impact. Why? Because the Afro-American Negro is not very good at strategy. And you have to be very good at strategy in order to facilitate change. And when I look at your African American Negro leaders, most of them do things from the seat of their pants. They do things in a disorganized fashion. And most importantly, they do things based on emotion. When you do things based on emotion, you're not going to have an impact long term. When a person uses strategy, they plan out what they're going to do, what then the other person does. For every action, they have an equal and opposite action, constructive action, that will facilitate the impact that they want to have. And when I look at the course of action for your African American Negro leaders and your African American Negroes, whether it be your Minister Louis Farrakhan's, your Al Sharptons, your Negro talking heads, or your Black Lives Matter people, I look at them and it looks like the Three Stooges and Laurel and Hardy, making a plan to build a house. And they can't get it has, and all they're doing is bumbling and stumbling, and all the rest of the world is doing is laughing at them. Now, when I look at the picture for, you know, arranging an effective boycott, it's just not being executed here. Um, the thing that makes boycotts and things have an impact is timing. And the Negro missed out on the window of opportunity. He was given the perfect opportunity to have the greatest impact, and most importantly, win the support of people all over the world for his movement. And that time was in the last week of November of 2014. In that week, we had the county of Ferguson make the grand jury made a decision not to indict Officer Darren Wilson. Then you had a few days later, the another grand jury say they weren't going to indict Officer Pantaleo for choking out Eric Garner. Now, both of these incidents happened somewhere between Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And there was no call from your black leaders to say, you know what, if black lives don't matter, then the black dollar doesn't matter to businesses. And we need to make a statement about the black dollar. No, what did the Negro do? He went out in the streets with his signs that he bought from Staples and magic markers from Staples and said, Black Lives Matter. He had his die-ins and he stood outside protesting stores, outside of stores. And then, a couple of days later, went out and shopped at those same stores. So there was no impact. Now, if he had said, you know what, all these people said, look, this is a human rights violation. What was done to these men was egregious. We're tired of cops, killing black people. What we're going to do is we're going to organize a boycott. If we don't get the indictments, then we're going to organize the boycott, of this week to have the most impact. This would have been the time to do it because what would have happened? You had the whole support of the world because the whole world saw this as a human rights violation. What happened to Eric Garner? A lot of people saw that as a human rights violation. So they would have gotten behind it regardless of Eric Garner's record. But no, your Afro-American Negroes instead decided to, organize these little marches, organize these protests, walk around the street, shouting Black Lives Matter, instead of saying, you know what, we need to keep our black dollars in our pockets. They didn't do that, and they let the window of opportunity, slip them by. Then they want to come 1 year later talking about, this movement. And at this point, it has no impact because you missed the window of opportunity. And people have had time to poke holes in Eric Garner. They've had time to poke holes in Michael Brown. They've had time to poke holes in their credibility. And several other black men who have been killed by police, they've had more time to poke holes into their stories, talking about how they were criminals and how they had criminal records and how they were messed up. And you missed the opportunity of a lifetime. The opportunity, again, was in 2014 to make that statement. But your black leaders want to wait till August of 2015 to do something. You missed out, again, on the opportunity. That holiday season of 2014 was the time to make that statement. That was the time for black people to take themselves and say, look, we didn't get indictments in both of these cases, so we're not going shopping. We're not shopping online. We're not shopping at all. Now, I did this myself, and I even wrote about it in a blog, but the Afro-American Negro did not do this. And then he wants to go, a year later and make the same statement. Well, the statement has no impact because one, you have no face, and two, you have no public support. So all the credibility that you would have had, you lost. And with that, you lost the momentum that would have made your boycott have the strongest impact. Now, when you do it now, because of the poor execution and the poor timing, nobody's going to take it seriously. Instead, they're going to look at these African Americans as nuisances and troublemakers instead of people with a legitimate cause that the world can get behind. This is something that the people of the old school civil rights movement understand. They understood strategy, they understood timing, they understood execution. But when I look at today's black people, they don't understand timing, execution, strategy. They don't understand, how these elements work for a movement to make a statement. In many ways, your African American Negroes remind me of ISIL. These guys in the Middle East, and who bombed France, doing random bombings and random shootings, and saying, we want to have our movement to make an impact. Well, it doesn't have an impact that way. You have to have, timing and strategy in order for a movement to really make a statement. In order to make a statement, again, then the movement has to say something, has to know how to time things where it makes a statement and makes a profound statement. Otherwise, it's just another random act. And this is something that many, people of color do not understand, regarding strategy. And I look at the whole boycott Christmas thing, and it's not going to be taken seriously. Most people aren't taking it seriously. And there are other reasons why people, just don't take this movement seriously besides strategy and timing. And that is where the flow of the dollars comes from. When you look at your Afro-American Negro dollar, I mean, you have black men talking about boycott Christmas, but who controls the dollar in the Afro-American Negro community? That's right, the African-American Negro woman controls the dollar in the community. So you look at the movement, and it's not going to gain any traction because most of the Afro-American Negro men, like myself, are out of work. So we don't control the dollars in the community. Who controls the dollars in the community again? Your Afro-American Negro woman. And you know what she's going to do with the dollars because she's an emotional spender. She's an emotional buyer. And she wants to, satisfy all of her needs immediately. So she's going to be the one going out and buying her kids $100 Xbox games, $200 sneakers, $300 jeans, and, having her CRISMUS, because she doesn't want to disappoint the children. While the men are talking about, this as a political move, the woman has a job, she controls the money in your community, and the flow of those dollars, is not going to change unless you can get her on your side. And I don't see, anybody presenting a position to her regarding getting her on your side. All I see is a lot of guys, they'll talk about, because in her mind, it's like this. Yeah, that black boy, Michael Brown, was killed. Yeah, that boy, Trayvon Martin, was killed. Yeah, that boy, Oscar Grant was killed. But that was not my son. Because this is the thing with your Afro-American Negro woman. She's very selfish. She's very narcissistic. She says it didn't happen to her son, so it didn't happen, at all to her. So she's thinking that was their son. And this is something that, the media uses for divide and conquer. That wasn't her son. Her son was the good boy. That was that boy over there. He's a thug. He's a criminal. He's a bad boy. And that allows her to separate herself and her children from what happens to other people's children. And this is something that, many of your black leaders, have not really thought about regarding your Afro-American Negro woman and why it's important to get her on your side. Because again, if she controls the dollars and she has this view that happened to that child and she individualizes it and does not see, black men as a group, how does that affect black men? Because when you have a black male movement, you as black men, you're starting off at a weak point. You have no economic power because you don't have most of the jobs in the community. You don't control most of the $1.1 trillion in cash in your community. You don't control the $2.2 trillion in credit in your community. And you don't have the support of your woman 100% behind your cause. And this is something that your leaders, haven't thought about. You need to have a united front, and you don't have that. And that's why many of your movements, wind up stopping short or they wind up executing poorly, like this whole boycott Christmas farce. Because you need a united front, and clear to me, your woman is not with you, because I've seen, just walking down the street, going to the library, or, just going down the street, who's doing a lot of the spending? Your Afro American Negro woman. So much for Boycott Christmas if your woman is right out here, you know, spending money and she controls the money. So that pretty much takes a lot of the bite out of your movement. But your Afro American Negro leaders will sit there and, talk about boycott Christmas, talk about boycotting Black Friday, talk about boycotting Cyber Monday, and they don't understand, why their movement doesn't gain traction. And it's because, the timing, the lack of support, and just the lack of strategy altogether. And the third element that, hurts this whole boycott Christmas and Black Friday is it's done with no, long-term strategy. This is another big problem with your Afro-American Negro civil rights leaders and your Black Lives Matter people. I mean, boycott Christmas, boycott Black Friday, boycott Cyber Monday, and how does that change the flow of the black dollar? I mean, yes, you stop the flow of the black dollar for a short period of time, and the CEOs of Walmart and Target are going to look at that for about a second, but how does that affect long-term change? This is something your black leaders really didn't think about either. I mean, if you're going to really have an impact long-term, why isn't there a campaign to get people to start supporting black-owned businesses like I own, the SJS Direct imprint? Now, I sell through Amazon, but quite a bit of the money that is sold, especially on paperbacks, comes to me. And every dollar that is spent with buying one of my books, or a black product from another black-owned business goes to a black-owned business. But your black leaders they come out with a blanket statement saying, boycott Black Friday, boycott Christmas, boycott Cyber Monday, not thinking to consider, bringing those dollars to black-owned businesses, black enterprises, and helping them, get the dollars that they need to build their businesses and expand their businesses. You would think, as part of a comprehensive plan of boycotting somebody else's business, you would have an alternative presented to them so that they can go and give their money towards a black person and investing in their business. But your black leaders, again, because they do everything based on emotion and not logic and reason, where they set up a long-term strategy that can be executed effectively, what they do is they give you broad blanket statements. They have black people running around talking about things on emotion, but they don't have any long-term effective strategies. And you would think putting black-owned businesses and talking about supporting black-owned businesses would be part of a long-term strategy. But there is no long-term strategy with these guys. Again, everything is done off the seat of their pants. We only got this announcement from your Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan, out in August, and the Negroes took it and ran with it. But again, no real strategy behind it so that there would be, equal and opposite constructive action for all the actions. No faces to talk about, credible faces like your Eric Garners and your Michael Browns at the time in 2013 and 14 when they had, the world behind them. No, support from your black woman who controls the dollars in your community and getting her to understand that, what happened to your Eric Garners and your Michael Browns could happen to your sons. No plan to bring black business into this so that black people have a constructive alternative to go shop at so that their dollars, if they want to spend them for Christmas, then decide to go into other business, into black hands, and no real long-term goal towards progressing the race long-term. When you look at the big picture regarding this whole campaign, it shows the ineffectiveness and incompetence of your black leaders. And it shows the ineffectiveness and your incompetence of black people. They don't understand how things work. They don't understand the mechanics of how things work. They do everything based on emotion, not with reason and logic. They don't do anything with a full plan or a strategy. And even if you give them the ideas and tools, they just can't execute. I mean, I look at the big picture regarding this whole movement, and I look at all the movements, and it's like, again, watching the Three Stooges or watching Laurel and Hardy. They're just bumbling and stumbling, trying to do things without ever understanding, the mechanics of how it works. And in order to make something work, you have to understand the mechanics of it. You have to understand the structure of it. you have to understand the form of it and how everything works, interdependently, and how everybody has to work together in order to accomplish something constructive. Now, you could have had an impact with this boycott if you had the face behind it, the support behind it, and, the counter plan, counter place, to build up your own businesses. But the Afro American Negro does not have any of that. All he has, for the most part, are a bunch of people being emotional, a lot of people being melodramatic. Yes, they make a big spectacle on TV, but when people look at those people on TV, they don't see anyone they need to take serious. They don't see anyone they need to concern themselves with. And most importantly, you have black people who don't see themselves as somebody that they need to worry about or concern themselves with, because they have disconnected themselves as a group and they only see themselves as individuals. And that allows people to pick them apart and, continue to maintain that flow of dollars into their communities, the 98% of dollars that goes into their community, without a plan for keeping it, out of it. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.